feeling like, okay, I need to do more. I need to prove myself. I need to get the straight A's. I need to get into a good university. I need to work for the UN. I need to achieve all these things. It's been an exhausting part of my life. I identified as Chinese or part Chinese, but clearly to others, I'm not. We were playing games. I was doing the whole Latina, don't talk to me, but then I would send him this thing, and he's German, and he wanted to follow the rules and be like, okay, if she told me not to bother her, then I shouldn't be bothering her. But then she's sending me this message, and this is confusing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dating Beyond Borders podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that hits home for so many people, growing up as a third culture kid. That feeling of not quite belonging anywhere, of asking yourself, is any place really home? Or on the flip side, maybe it's what makes you adaptable enough to fit in anywhere. But of course, it also comes with its own struggles and challenges. To unpack all of this, I'm thrilled to be joined by Maria Rincon. She's a former TV host, a TEDx speaker, a speaking coach, and most importantly, a third culture kid herself. So welcome, Maria.
Yay! Thank you for having me.
Tell me about this experience of growing up half Chinese, half Colombian in Colombia. What part of your personality, of your values felt more, let's start with the Asian side of what makes you you.
Okay, so I'm going to give the audience some context. So my mom is Chinese. She's from Chengdu, Sichuan, which is known for pandas and hot pot. And my dad is from Colombia, from Bogota. So we say he's a Rolo, from the capital city. And I grew up speaking Chinese with my mom and Spanish with my dad. Primarily, though, I was raised by my mom after my parents divorced when we immigrated to Canada. And we were raised with a lot of Chinese values. And one of the big things is being raised by quote unquote, a tiger mom, which is a strict parenting style where a parent really puts a lot of emphasis on my academic success. So I grew up with basically in high school asking my mom, hey, mom, do you want me to help in the kitchen? And she'd be like, no, go focus on getting straight A's. So I think the most Asian thing about me is that I suffer from an overachieving syndrome, feeling like, okay, I need to do more. I need to prove myself. I need to get the straight A's. I need to get into a good university. I need to work for the UN. I need to achieve all these things. And it's been an exhausting part of my life, but it's also something that is culturally mine in a sense.
It's very interesting. And then your mom, are there a lot of Chinese people in Colombia?
No. So when my mom immigrated there in the 90s, she said that in Pasto, which is a different city they moved to, she was in a Spanish language class, and there were 3 Asians. There was a lady from China, which was her, a lady from Japan, and a lady from Korea. And my mom back then actually opened one of the first Chinese restaurants in that city.
Interesting. So I wonder how it's also changed your mom living in Colombia, because it's just such a different culture as well.
100%. I think she just definitely owned up to being who she is, and she was very well known. She would throw these lavish dinner parties in her restaurant and have the Chinese fans and wear qipao, and was also really proud of showing off Chinese culture and dressing my sister and I up in these little mini qipaos, which are traditional Chinese dresses, and having us do Chinese dance performances, etc.
So you grew up in Colombia, mostly, as you said, with your mom, right? You're closer to your mom. Did you ever feel like you didn't really fit in to the Colombian way of life, that mentality? Did you ever feel different?
I think growing up there, I was quite young, so I didn't really understand what made me different. It was actually the opposite, that when I went to China, and I was walking around one day with my mom and my sister, and there was a lovely bystander that came up and said to my mom, oh, you're such a sweet woman. You adopted these children from outside of China. And then I was like, that was a moment that made me realize I identified as Chinese or part Chinese, but clearly to others, I'm not. And then coming back to Colombia, I think since immigrating to Canada, every time we go back to Colombia, my sister and I felt like we weren't Colombian enough. We didn't really get the slang or the latest pop music. And it just felt like we love our Colombian roots, but it didn't really feel like we were fully Colombian.
It's so interesting. I used to be a high school teacher, and I used to work in Panama, in the country, in a school there. And I remember there was a Chinese kid. His name was Mario, because he was Asian, Latin American, I suppose, Asian background, but he grew up in Panama. And, in Canada, I'm sure you're well aware that you don't do the I thing. You don't do the Asian eye thing. You just don't do that. I'd say in most of the Western world, but in Latin America, those kids used to make fun of this Mario kid and do the Asian eye thing. And I, I got angry and I said, "You guys can't do that." And then they said, "But why not? He's Chinese." And he said, "Miss, I don't understand. What is the problem with that? I'm Chinese. It's just, we don't care that much." And it's obviously you have nicknames like Negrito and
Chino,
Gordo, Chino,
chinito,
Chino,
gordo. Yeah.
Chinito, right? So did you ever kind of face that growing up in Latin America, being like, "Oh, she's the Asian kid"?
I actually haven't thought about it until now, but when you brought that up, I think I was called like chinita or china.
And that's not something offensive there. It's just more
No,
like that's what you look like, and that's what we're gonna call you.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. I kind of like it. I mean, maybe I wouldn't have liked it if I was called gordita, but usually that's, I think, reserved for the mom. Um,
Yeah.
when I was in Argentina, they used to call me Rusita because I was Russian and they didn't know any other Russians. They used to be very upset when, like, I once went to a bar and I said, they said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Russia." And this one guy got all of his Argentinian friends to come and look at the Russian. They all got together. They looked at me and they were thoroughly disappointed because I didn't resemble the stereotypical blonde, tall woman that they had in mind. And they were like, "You look like us. This is disappointing." They all left. But yeah, this whole thing with nicknames is really, really funny, right? So you never really felt like you were discriminated against in some way, that you were different, really.
Actually, that came when I immigrated to Canada. So then I was 7 years old. Knew Spanish and Chinese, spoke those languages at home, but came to Canada without speaking any English. And my dad would take us to the library and get us to read in English and only speak to English to us at home. And when I went to school, I had a very thick Spanish accent, which is considered like sexy now because it's like Gloria from Modern Family. But I had that back then when I was in elementary school, and I got made fun of for that. And then not only did I get made fun of for my Spanish accent, but I also got made fun of for the Chinese lunches I was bringing. So my mom, an incredible chef, had her own restaurant. She made homemade dumplings with pork and chives, and also like her own soy sauce with spices. And I would bring that every day, very excited to go to school. And as you know, the story goes, like people were like, "Ew, it's my lunch, put that away." So I remember one time where my sister and I had to eat our lunches out in the hallway by ourselves with where the cubbies were instead of with our classmates. And that made us feel like, oof, yeah, very isolated in a sense.
I'm surprised to hear that because you said you grew up in BC, right? In Vancouver, was it?
Hmm. In Vancouver.
Wasn't there like a big Asian population there when you were growing up?
Yes, in Richmond. So when we first moved to Vancouver, we were in like mainland Vancouver. And that most of the kids at the school, there were some immigrants, but it was mostly like Canadians and Caucasian kids. And it wasn't until later in high school we moved to Richmond, and it was Asian galore.
Very interesting. Now, we talked about the Asian side of things. What is your Latin side, if you could? I mean, it's a very difficult question because, we have it's such a difficult way to kind of sum it up. But, have you thought about the ways that are very like Colombian that you do?
I think dancing is one that comes to mind for sure. There's a Colombian saying that Colombians are born dancing out of their mom's wombs. So that's something that applies to me. I'm sure that's something you study in Panama and Argentina, like the energy, the aliveness that comes with people that love to dance and just music in general. That's something that I carry deeply with me. And teaching my German husband to dance salsa has been a challenge, but we're having some fun along the way. And I've been dancing my whole life. So I started with Chinese dance as a kid because my mom forced me to do that. But then I went into different styles like Afro beats and hip hop, a bit of salsa. And it's brought me a lot of joy in everyday life.
How do you feel being from two cultures, living in another culture? How did this shape you as a person going forward?
I think it's opened me up to a lot of worldviews, made me definitely more adaptable. And I'm able to kind of see perspectives from many different sides, be much more open-minded. I think that's something you can relate to as much as you've traveled around the world and also being an immigrant kid yourself.
Yeah, I think culture is such an interesting thing because I focus so much on culture, but I can't really pin myself down personally because there are certain parts of my personality that are very Eastern European, like the directness, just being very direct in how I like to talk to people like less fluff, less, I would say superficiality, although there are many, many Russians that are known for superficiality, but in a different way. But I think in conversation, I think I've struggled quite a lot in Canada because Canada is so conflict avoidant. And now that you live in Sweden, it's another very conflict avoidant country. We really beat around the bush and we don't want to hurt people's feelings, but a lot of things are left unsaid because we're afraid of digging deep and really, because for example, if I meet someone from another culture would say like, oh, where are you from? But a lot of times that's seen as, oh, that's inappropriate. You can't really, because they look a certain way, you can't really ask that question. And for me, it comes from a place of curiosity because, when I say I'm Canadian abroad, people usually say, oh, are you from Quebec? Because they're like, you don't look, I mean, they just think like, what is like Canadian, right? What is Canadian? But you also don't look what I would assume to be Canadian. And I'm like, no, I'm Russian. But I like that question because I think it's interesting when someone wants to ask you where you come from, right? So for you, when people ask you, where are you from? What do you say?
It's a problematic question. No, I'm kidding. I don't mind. How dare you? I don't mind being asked that. I've shaped my answer to be I'm Colombian-Chinese, but I was raised in Canada. And before that, I would say I'm Colombian. And then I would get all these follow-up questions like, oh, but you sound American. And I'm like, no, it's because I was raised in Canada. And then I also didn't want to not mention the part that's Chinese because that's also important. That's part of my culture. So yes, my answer is I'm Colombian-Chinese and raised in Canada.
Does your answer ever depend on where you are in the world? Because for me, if I'm in Europe, I usually just say Canadian, but it's also because Russia has a really bad connotation these days. So I avoid saying that. Whereas in Canada, I kind of have to say I'm Russian because, obviously I'm in Canada. And if I'm in Latin America, probably I would be like, but I'm Russian because that's exotic and it's cool, and people don't really have much of a negative connotation or they don't know as much. So, and in a lot of places, I really hide actually where I'm from. And I've had like some negative stories that happened recently with that, which made me really think about this whole concept of, it's like being embarrassed to say where you're from because of how politics can change. Obviously, for you, maybe when COVID happened, you were like, oh, well, then if you say you're Chinese, people perceive you a certain way as well, Or if you say you're Colombian, maybe before or sometimes there's a perception that, oh, you're a Latina, so you have to be this way, this way, this way, fiery, sexy, whatever, right? So do you ever feel like, oh, I don't know that I'm going to say I'm Chinese, or I don't know that I'm going to say I'm Colombian, or have you not had this problem at all?
I mean, now that you mention it, it kind of made me reflect back on, how could I have answered or if I ever thought about it in that way. And I definitely feel what you said when you change context depending on where you are. And for me, I've kind of just always been like, this is it. This is me. Whether you like it or not, like this is the handful you get. So always been and people say like the triple C. So Colombian, Chinese, Canadian, which is a handful.
Everyone, just a quick note to say that while I love putting these podcasts together each week, they do take a ton of time and effort. So if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to follow on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're tuning in, and give this podcast a 5-star rating to help it grow. This support really helps me keep improving the show's quality. Thank you, and back to the episode. What's the reactions that you get usually when you say that?
People are curious. Some people say, oh. And I'm like, noted. But no, other people are curious and they're like, oh, well, so which side of your family is Chinese or Colombian? Or is any part of you adopted? Or do you speak the 3 languages, etc.? Or when did you move to Canada? Which is, it's a fun conversation starter as well.
Well, let me ask you first of all, because you lived in Canada and now you live in Sweden, you married to a German guy, very international lifestyle, let's just say. Where would you say the closest to home has been for you?
That's the question I keep battling. I'm like, what is the notion of home for me and where is that? And recently I picked up this book called Third Culture Kids because I wanted to kind of understand and not feel like I'm the only one dealing with this, which I'm not. There are so many people out there, whether they are immigrants or nomads, or they've just moved around a lot, or they are third culture kids that have dealt with this, like, what is home for me? I've definitely come to understand that for me personally, it's about the relationships. So Home for me is everywhere that I have my family. And now that includes a husband, which is like, woo, scary to say. But also the friends I've made along the way. So in Beijing, some of them are now based in Australia. They're based in Portugal. They're in Sweden. They're back in Canada. They're in Colombia. But I don't have like a very set notion of home. I would say right now it's in between Canada and Sweden, where my family and my husband are.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with me because it's been such a struggle to find a place to call home. Also because no matter where you go, if you didn't grow up there, if you didn't spend a significant amount of time there, if you don't have any community there, you're going to look for things that are really great and things that are not so great. And there's always something that's not going to be, it can be a wonderful country, but it may not also be your mentality in a way, And that's also really hard because, okay, it's a great country, but especially if you're remote, which I suppose, I don't know if you are fully remote, I am. It's almost like you need certain roots in that place where you have your husband in Sweden. But if you come alone and you're here alone and you have to start from scratch, it's really, really challenging for a lot of people, especially Sweden, obviously, because it's not the easiest place to make friends. But it's also that I think for me, a place like Canada, I don't know that I would call it home, even though I moved when I was 12, and maybe you can relate to this. It's like, is this my home? I think the easy part about Canada is that everyone's kind of not from here. Most of the people, at least, are not from Canada. So you feel like, oh, it's so easy to integrate into that. But a part of me still craves to be in Europe because somehow maybe it's a little bit closer to my culture, my mentality. And yet, when you go to all these individual countries, you have to be willing to also kind of assimilate into the mentality and the views of that country as well. So that's been really, really difficult for me to find that place where I felt really at home. And what you said as well about having friends all over the world. This is something that I make friends and they're all in different countries. And I just wish they're all in one country. Because it's so hard because especially when you're always moving around, it's really hard to build that life in that one country. I gave you a lot to work with, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Definitely. And now that I am married and thinking of the notion of home, it's also realizing that it's not going to be like anyone else's definition. It's not going to just be the place they were born or the place where their family is or the place where they've moved in with their significant other. My partner and I, we have really struggled with, okay, what is home for us? Is it Sweden? Is it Canada? Is it Germany? Where are we going to move to? Is it a place where we build together? Is it has to be Sweden because we're here right now? But also understanding that it has to be our own definition. So, and that has to be probably hybrid for us. So it's maybe going to be more than one place and being okay with that. So also breaking free from that definition that home is just one place.
Your husband, he has lived abroad for quite a while as well.
Yes. So he's been abroad, apart from Germany, far away from Germany from like 10 years, almost 15 years now.
Do you feel like that's partly why you kind of, there was that attraction is that he was also quite international? Or am I just, am I far off here?
No, you're definitely not far off. It's not something I thought of consciously, like when I pick friends or when I picked partners, there wasn't like one of the things on the checklist is that they have an international mindset. However, I was talking to a close friend and she was saying, that for me is one of the things on the checklist because she's traveled to 60 plus countries and now she's back in her home country. And she says it's hard for her to meet guys with the same kind of mindset. That's not how I saw it before, but I totally get where she's coming from. And for me, I think it's more about if we connect on a deeper level. And I think what we do have in common for sure is that we do love to travel. So whether that's either based on the fact that we've had international experiences or we look really forward to that and to having those experiences, that's something that definitely brought us together.
Yeah, I also, it's not something that I do consciously. And I don't know that I have friends I don't know that everyone's international, but maybe because obviously when you live abroad, you tend to make friends with expats and those they have to be somewhat international because they moved abroad. I also think what happens when you move abroad is that you really start to understand where you come from better because you have a point of comparison. I mean, I do a lot of on the street interviews around the world, and there are, of course, very, very self-aware locals. you will do an interview and they're like, yeah, this is how Irish people are because I read a lot of sociology and psychology. And, I'm just a very, very, like, I think a lot. But overall, what I found was easier is when you meet someone that has also lived abroad for quite some time. And then they come back and they say, oh, I realize that we do X, Y, Z. And I didn't know this before I lived in this country. Great example. I was just in Spain for a couple of months. And I met a guy, he was actually my subscriber. And he said he lived in, I think it was Belgium. And he never realized before moving to Belgium that Spanish people have no spatial awareness and they just take up the whole pavement. And he's like, I didn't notice this. It's so true. It's so true. And I noticed this day one. I mean, I noticed this, and especially like the first week I was there, then you kind of get used to it somewhat. But that first couple of weeks, you feel that small culture shock where you think, why are people, because you're also comparing it against Canada, where everyone is very aware of, how close they are to other people and please go ahead and thank you and sorry. So he said that to me and he's like, but I had no idea when I was living in Spain that this was a thing. And so, yeah, I mean, living in Sweden now, have you realized something about where you come from, where you're like, oh, I didn't appreciate this? I don't know if it's Colombia, I don't know if it's Canada, yeah, or I don't know if it's you realize something about yourself that you are more XYZ than you thought. What was it?
I think we bonded over this on that LinkedIn post you created about small talk. And I was like, when I read that, I was like, yes, like she gets what I'm talking about. And that's something that I found out not only only after moving to Sweden, that I enjoyed so much when I go back to Canada and I'm just doing my regular chores, like getting gas, getting groceries, maybe getting a coffee or something. And there's just like small moments of small talk that just light up my day. One really funny one is like when I'm getting like a wax, like my waxing technician is just like telling me about all these like fun stories in her regular work to work. And I'm just like laughing my ass off and I'm just having a great time. And I'm like, this would never happen in Sweden. And I've had a waxing done in Sweden and it's just like complete silence. So the small talk thing has been something that I've brought over from Canada and in the way that I am and it was something I appreciate so much when I'm not there.
Did you appreciate it when you lived in Canada, or do you appreciate it now that you don't have it?
I definitely took it for granted in Canada. And there were days where I'd be like, okay, today, like I'm on my period, I have a hoodie on, I don't want to talk to anyone. But then now being in Sweden, I'm like, oh, I crave that so much. And it's something so little, but it really makes a difference.
Yeah, small talk is so interesting because a lot of Europeans and Scandinavians specifically, they find it so fake and so unnecessary. But I think I always say this, and that's why I said it in my LinkedIn post. Like, it can be, but it also can be a way to connect with someone, and I think that's important. And especially these days when we work from home, for me especially, and I noticed it as well. I was, like I said, I was in Spain, and you would think, oh, Spain, it's such a social country. Everybody talks to each other. No, that's not how I experienced it. And I've been there many times, and maybe there are certain parts of Spain that are friendlier than others. But I remember in Spain, it's got like you have interactions, but it's not like if you go to, I don't know, say Mexico or Colombia, and people just naturally talk to you, they just ask you questions, or you'll be at the bus stop and someone will say, when is the bus coming? Oh, and then, they'll tell you their whole life story. Which, it's very genuine. And I would say like Latin American small talk is probably more genuine than we do in North America. Because in North America, we're a little bit self-aware. We're like, oh, smile, 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 smile. Okay, this is getting awkward. I hope the elevator door opens and we can get out of this very uncomfortable small talk. But Latin Americans, they just talk. Like they don't have the same kind of filters or self-awareness to it, which I really appreciated, right?
Yeah, I think unpopular opinion that like some people don't like small talk, but now that we're living in, like you said, remote first, we're like lonelier than ever. So I know that maybe it's like cringy to like do small talk, but for me, like I found 90% of the time that when I do initiate, people react positively to it.
Yeah. I love it. I love it when someone can crack a joke. I went to Ireland after being in Spain, and also the north of the UK, where they're very, very like chill, blunt people. And people would just make comments to me like, oh, I went to the store and the guy goes, oh, you shouldn't be getting that. That has a lot of sugar in it. I mean, he was just trying to be funny. or like, oh, love, are you lost? Like, can I show you the way? Or just commenting and saying, I really like your dress, which is a very North American thing to do, you know? But that's why I brought up the story of my friend who lives in Barcelona, who, when we went to New York, she said, oh my God, like I haven't been approached and complimented in such a long time that it's almost alien to me. And I thought, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's something that we're very used to, that you can talk to anyone. People are like prepared for you to talk to them here. Um, what has been one of the hardest things about living in Sweden for you?
I think for sure the winters have been really tough. Uh, don't want to go into like stereotypical Latina, but the fact that they say like you have to take vitamin D on every month that has an R in it. So starting with September, I'm just like, that is rough. And no, yeah, like seasonal depression and just feeling down and not feeling like you want to be productive or yourself yeah, it really sucks. So winters have been really tough, and especially kind of I think repeating my first immigrant experience in Canada. So when I first moved to Sweden, I genuinely inside felt like that immigrant kid that just immigrated to Vancouver, like didn't speak any English and was just kind of isolated. And there are so many beautiful things about Sweden. And at the same time, it's a very individualistic culture. And especially in winters, people are just cooped up in their cozy apartments and no one wants to talk and it's harder to make friends. So creating community was really tough in the beginning, and kind of reliving that immigrant life was quite tough. And yeah, that was one of the toughest things. And on the opposite side, some things I've loved about Sweden, fika. It's now kind of a love language of mine. So fika is essentially a tradition of taking time out of your day to enjoy a coffee, tea, or a pastry with a friend or a colleague or a family member. It's part of my routine now, in moderation, and sauna as well. Like just beautiful benefits of it, but also the community that surrounds sauna and how it's part of people taking care of themselves and their body and their mind is a really cool thing about Sweden that I really, really love.
Do you think Sweden does certain things better than Canada does?
Candy is one thing they do way better. So they have like these huge candy shops where it's like the bucket and you get your own. I've never seen anything like that in Canada. And I think the Swedish tradition of like Saturday night candy is one of my favorites.
Interesting. Has it been difficult for you to assimilate into the Swedish culture, make friends? Has communication been difficult for you at all? Or because of your international mindset, like you've been able to kind of find ways to connect with people?
No, I think in the beginning, I felt like I wasn't going to live in Sweden for a long time. So I didn't really bother in investing in learning the language. Now being here 2.5 years, I'm like, I should have started earlier. And I'm a firm believer that if I live in a country, I should be able to speak the language. However, I've definitely procrastinated on that in Sweden here because they make it so easy to just speak English and everyone's English level is so high. It's not an excuse though. So yes, it's definitely been hard. And reflecting on like my friend circle, as you said, talking about having expat friends or international friends, a majority of my friends are international or expats. And the Swedish friends that we do have are definitely ones that have spent time abroad. And it's not to say that local Swedes or someone that I can't connect to. It's just, yeah, it's been difficult to break that friendship barrier and get really close with local Swedes, which I would love to. Just hasn't happened.
So, why Sweden? Walk me through the story of why you moved to Sweden, how you met your husband, and yeah.
So it was middle of COVID, I believe, and I was in Denmark doing an internship for the United Nations during my master's program. And I was dating a lot of guys in Copenhagen. Some international, some Danes. I was on all the apps, Tinder, Hinge, Bumble. And after a fun summer, but unsuccessful summer, I was like, okay, I want to delete the apps now. But I had a sweet spot for Hinge, and I was like, I'm just going to have one more look. And in that last look, it was Toby, my husband. And it was just lucky because I think the radar had expanded all the way to the other side of the bridge, which was Malmo. So Denmark and Sweden are beside each other. And it was during COVID. So we actually, our first 3 days were on phone calls and we would just talk for an hour or two. And we bonded over the School of Life, Brene Brown. It was kind of romantic because we couldn't really see each other. So maybe that added to the spice. And then when the border restrictions became a bit more relaxed, he came over with his dog. And I was like, game over.
Wow. So how long did you guys date for before you got married?
Around 3 years. And then I got a job in Stockholm with a carbon accounting company in social media management. Went back to the UN, and Toby, he's been here for 7 years. He has a base here, and since I was working remotely, it just kind of made sense for me to move here.
Very interesting. So you guys had this kind of long distance relationship. Well, it's not very long distance. It's like a short distance kind of relationship. But you immediately moved in together when you moved to Sweden. Looks like.
Yeah, that was wild.
Wow.
Like, I didn't really think of anything at the time, but now thinking back, I'm like, yeah, that was kind of crazy.
Well, it's either you survive that or you don't survive that, and very, very fast. There's something kind of cool about that, because I feel like nowadays, like, we're all for testing relationships out. Oh, don't invest too much, take it slow, go with the flow. But if you move in together very fast, you get to know this person really well. And so if there's certain things that you simply cannot deal with, or if this person is someone you want to spend the rest of your life with faster. Than if you go on one date a week and you see them only in nice settings, you look your best, he looks his best, you act a bit of a role. I don't know. I kind of like that, skipping the whole part and just going straight for a relationship. I've done that. I've done that in the past as well. Like, with my ex-boyfriend, moved in right away. We were together during COVID as well. Spent that whole time living together. So, didn't last, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, straight into the madness. But there is a part I left out. So in between us, before I moved to Sweden, we had like a few months where we weren't together. So I went back to Colombia to finish my master's and do a yoga retreat and do like a focus on myself thing. And he was still in Sweden. And we were like not talking to each other. So he was dating other girls, etc. And I was focusing on myself and dating other guys. And I think during that year, or like during those months, we realized like, okay, we really want to be with each other. And so when I moved to Turkey to work with UNICEF, he actually flew down to come see me. And we had a week together and we're like, okay, this is it. Like, who are we kidding? Why are we wasting time? And that's when we decided to move in together.
What sealed that deal? I mean, what was that feeling that you said, you know what, I want to stop dating all these guys and just be with this one guy?
I don't think that in my mid-20s I was very self-reflective, but it was an event specifically. So I was in Colombia, and my aunt and I were on a beach just getting very drunk on margaritas. It was like free flow, and she's widowed. And so we were very drunk talking about very deep things. And all of a sudden she's like, Maria, who's the love of your life? Because she was talking about her late husband and how she said they were perfect together. And yeah, he's no longer here. So like this feeling in her wanted to ask me that. And I was like, no, like I'm not into anyone right now. I haven't met the love of my life. I've been in relationships before, but I just know they weren't the ones. And then she's like, you're lying. Like, tell me, who is the love of your life? And I was like, well, if there's like the closest things that comes, it's probably this German guy I met in Copenhagen. And then she was like, she took my phone. She's like, call him right now. I was like, I'm not going to do anything crazy like that. So I didn't call him, but I sent him an Instagram post and it said, maybe we'll meet again when we're ready to love. And he didn't answer for a whole week. So this was like, what is going on here? But in the end, he flew to Turkey to come see me. And we're like, we both knew we wanted to be with each other.
Wow.
So we were playing games. I mean, I was doing the whole Latina, like, don't talk to me. But then I would send him this thing, and he's German, and he was like, he wanted to follow the rules and be like, okay, if she told me not to bother her, then I shouldn't be bothering her. But then she's sending me this message, and this is confusing. But in the end, yeah, I think love wins. So
that's so funny that you just brought up the cultural difference, because I was going to ask you. I mean, obviously, you both are quite international, so I don't want to pigeonhole you and say you're Latina and he's German, but there must be certain aspects of your personality that show up. Like, I don't think of myself as very Eastern European, but when I'm in a relationship, I'm like, oh, damn, that was very Eastern European of me. I'm like, oh, you didn't get me flowers. And I realized that I'm expecting certain things somehow, just in the way that I was brought up, in the way that I see romance. And I remember that was such an issue with my ex because he was Dutch and he was very like, you know, pragmatic and he just saw relationships very differently. Whereas mine was like, no, I wanted fireworks, but he just was like, no, stability and trusting each other and, the nice routine coziness. That's good. That's what a relationship is. I'm like, no, damn it. I want flowers and I want compliments and I want this. Anyways,
I so relate.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, did you guys deal with any of that? That, as you said, where he was like, she told me not to talk to her. Whereas for us women, we're like, no, if I say no, that doesn't mean no. I want you to chase me and I want you to prove.
Chase me. Show me what you want me.
Exactly. Did you guys have any of those like either misunderstandings or funny conflicts or like, okay, this is very different culturally?
I think that was the biggest one. Essentially, like me saying like, okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, and he's like, can we be friends? And I was like, no, I'm kind of done. Like, I'm going to leave Denmark because my internship's up. I want to go back to Colombia. Like, let's just go our separate ways. And then he's like, all right, then, well, I want to respect what she says because, well, yeah. So that was the biggest one, I think.
I love that because I just recently interviewed a couple. They were not a couple, they broke up, but they were on their second date. She was from Peru and he was from Germany. And I asked them a really dangerous question because I knew it was their second date. And I said, what is the biggest, how do you think about gender roles? And she said, well, I want the man to pay for me. And he said, I will only pay for the woman if I get consent from her that it's okay because I don't want to assume. And it was still like, he wasn't like for gender equality, but he was just like, no, I need consent first before. And she's like, no, like it's it was, they're very quite incompatible in that way. And then they messaged me afterwards and they said, it didn't work. So please remove the video. But it was funny in the way they saw it, those little things. And it's like, that's why I'm so interested in culture because it's what you assume, right? Like in that situation, when Toby did that, you assumed he wasn't interested, but he assumed that you didn't want him to pursue because you needed your space and he respected that. And that's where it's like a clash that you both didn't even realize at the time, right?
Culture is so ingrained in us, as you say.
Yeah. So that was it. That was the biggest one. You guys haven't had anything.
The biggest one. I think other culture shocks have been, I think it goes back to maybe what you say about like maybe Dutchmen as well. Like they're just very rational and pragmatic and practical. However, I do find the stability very sexy. Like just because I'm Latina and my notion of time is quite like flowing, relaxed. But after moving to Sweden and kind of working here professionally, I'm like, okay, I do like people that are on time. I like to be on time. I respect my time. I respect your time. But in the beginning, it was just very funny because he'd be like, ETA is 10:15, and literally at 10:15 he would be at the door. And this to my like Latina brain would be like, that's just so weird. Like that's just kind of unexpected. The other thing is something I already mentioned to you before is the notion of Abendbrot, which is having bread for dinner. And it's very German custom tradition and people don't have an issue with it. And the first time I had that in Germany, I was quite shocked because I'm used to hot meals at night, especially because my mom is a great chef and I've always had that custom. So when we had that for the first time, I was like, this is cute, but when is the main entree coming? And then in my whole mind, I was just like, the whole night, I was like, can we go to McDonald's afterwards? Like, this is just not a vibe. And he was like, you're such a princess. And I'm like, but this tradition is just not for me. So that was another fun little culture shock.
I agree with you so much. I really struggled with this when I was dating my Dutch boyfriend because I like to tell this story, but we went home to his mom's home for Christmas. And every day we ate cheese and bread. And I don't know how you feel, but for me, like whenever I eat just bread, my body does this weird thing where it's like not good, breaking down, need good food. And like it's like weird cravings. I start getting, actually I really love Asian food. And whenever I travel Europe, certain countries in Europe where the food isn't their main forte, let's say, I always look for ramen places or like good Chinese
Noodle
food.
soups are
Noodle
like the
soup.
gold mine.
Exactly, because it kind of nourishes you in a way that no sandwich in the world can nourish you that way, you know? So it's like my comfort food. Like if there's, I've wanted Asian food in the most ridiculous places in the world, but if I'm like in Austria or Germany or something like this, I'm like, okay, where is the closest Asian place that I can find where I can eat, first of all, not that expensive. Second of all, I could actually feel full from that. Because yeah, I'm also for hot lunches. I don't understand eating bread for lunch. I don't get it. And maybe you follow, there's another influencer, she's Vietnamese with a German guy. Uh, and she talks about this a lot as well.
Oh my gosh. There's a Vietnamese place that's like downstairs of the building I live, and they're closing. And I was like super upset that Toby and I like looked up on their website and just like reached out to be like, okay, are you opening a different location? Like what's going on? Because yes, it's also my comfort food.
If you could design your perfect home culture by mixing the elements of the ones that you would have experienced, what would it be? So let me give you straight up questions and you tell me which culture takes the lead. Okay, time management.
German.
Okay.
Yes.
Communication style, business communication style.
Oh, this is a hard one. I would say Canadian.
Why Canadian?
I'm not the most direct person, and I like to receive feedback in a direct way, but in a sandwich. So I work better with like positive reinforcement instead of like, this is bad, this is wrong, fix this. I think the German style would be way too direct for me. So I think the Canadian.
Swedes are also
The
conflict
Swedes,
avoidant.
no, but but then they would never actually get to what I can improve on. They don't want to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
So I'd say the Canadian way.
Everybody to give their 2 cents on the matter, isn't it?
Yes. The consensus is important here. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about let's talk about the way you see relationships. It's a very broad one, but
The way I see relationships. For no specific reason, I think like the Latino culture comes to mind. And there's just a lot of heart there. A lot of like laughter and fun. And that's something that's really important to me. So not that Chinese people and Canadians and Swedes don't have fun, but that's just something that came.
the way you are with family.
Latina as well. I think in Chinese culture, there's a lot of pressure to like take care of the older generation. And that's something that I definitely respect and value. But it's also a lot of pressure, especially as coming from like an Asian household. So yeah, I do value a little bit of independence, but also being very close with the family. But also not having that like very huge pressure or like duty to the family, which could feel a little bit heavy sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Sweden and Latin America, like Colombia and China, they have such incredibly different ways of dealing with families. We said they're individualistic, right? And you kind of are so self-sufficient in Sweden that you don't want to ask people for things, which is it's like a polar opposite of what obviously Chinese and Colombian cultures are. But as you said, I think, and I agree with you, I can totally relate to that. I think Latin American culture is just like very warm. You just spend a lot of time with family. It's not that it's like a good thing to spend time with family. It's not that you have to take care of, your parents when it's just kind of, there, as you said, there's less pressure. And I think it's a good balance for me personally. Food.
Chinese, 100%.
I agree.
Yeah. 100%.
What about making friends?
Oh. Trying to relate it to like what kind of style of, or how do I make friends? And I don't know what kind of culture that directly relates to.
Well, we could talk about communication, I mean, in general, right? Because we have Swedes that are very conflict avoidant, not very direct. Latinos are not very direct either, to be very fair.
Yeah.
I feel like, but warmer. Germans, quite direct. compared to the rest. And Chinese, suppose they're quite direct as well, right?
Chinese, I think it's a mix, but it's also a little bit indirect. And there's a lot of communication that happens under, I would say, like under the table. So like things that you don't really pick up with words, but it's maybe how you say things or like hidden connotation. So friends, I would say Canadian. Let's just start with some small talk. Get to know the person and be like, okay, are they comfortable with this or not? Oh, but this is something that's related to third culture kids. Is that I identify as a third culture kid, so we like to dive into friendships very fast and very soon because we know that our amount of time that we have in a specific place or a country or a city is very limited. So we want to get to know someone as fast as possible, and we're just very open-minded and curious. And for some people, that's kind of like a turn off. Like, whoa, like we should take our time. Like it should be first a coffee and only small talk, and then then it could be a lunch, and then we dive into a little bit of my personal life or my beliefs, etc. And then it can be something. But then I think a lot of the times it's kind of like, tell me everything now. I want to know everything about you, and let me share because time is precious. We're going to leave soon, and friendships are important.
And I think that's a great point, especially when it comes to the Scandinavian countries, because I think trust is developed so slowly there, which is why a lot of people really struggle. And it's like, if they do not believe that you're going to be in the country for a very long amount of time, there's also less trust.
And they're not going to invest as much.
Exactly. So why should I put trust in you when I have my 5 friends that are really good friends from childhood? We've already established friendships, and here you are, and you don't know if you're even going to stay in the country. There's a lot of effort put into friendships. It's interesting the way that friendships are approached. It's very serious, I would say, right? It's like investment. It's almost like a relationship. First, we go out for drinks. Then we call ourselves boyfriend, girlfriends. Then we're there for life.
You're going to be like, thank you. I had a great time. Just like let them know that you did enjoy yourself.
Exactly. Whereas I feel like with Latin Americans, the one complaint that I've heard is that people are so quick to overpromise because they're so in the moment, right? They're like, oh, let's be best friends. Come over this Friday. And then this Friday they forget or they change their minds. But it's very quick. It's like I feel like I really like this person right now.
Yeah.
But it's because it's so easy to talk to people. They don't really wait. There's less weight to each interaction. Like in Sweden, like I've talked to a new person. This is a serious deal. I'm going to invest in this now.
100%. And I think also keep those cultural nuances with the friends that I make. So, for example, when I make plans with my Latina friends, like I know that they're going to show up half an hour later. So I don't take it personally if they show up late. I'll just show up a little bit later. Versus like if we're meeting our Swedish friends, like, okay, we have to like leave the house now or else we're not going to get there in time. So also understanding like that cultural nuance and putting that into the friendships I make.
Has living in Sweden changed you in any ways? Have you, I don't know, people say they start planning more because you need to plan, or become more introverted, or like to stay indoors? What has it been for you?
I think the planning thing has been like a big culture shock, and it's something that I'm learning to do. So I had a birthday last weekend, and 2 weeks before that, I had messaged a whole bunch of my friends being like, "Hey, I'm going to have a casual get together at my place," and all my Swedish friends already had plans, and then all the internationals were free and they came. So it just goes to show, like for Swedes, planning in advance and the whole calendar of like when are we going to see each other next is something to be taken into account for. Versus, I think other cultures or international cultures are just more kind of like, yes, we have plans, but it's kind of fixed. We're open to last minute things, which is not the case for a lot of my Swedish friends.
Very interesting. So, as a final question to you, if you could narrow down your biggest challenge growing up as a third culture kid and the best thing to have come out of it, what would those two be? So we'll start with the negative first.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the negative first. Yeah. So just for context, third culture kid doesn't mean that that makes me a third culture kid because I have 3 cultures. It means that we have a home culture, we have a host culture, and then we have kind of that third culture, which is kind of us swimming in between all these cultures. So we don't really fit anywhere. For me, I think the negative aspect would be something that I actually read about in this book. It's called restlessness and rootlessness. So essentially not having deep roots in one specific place, which plays a big part in my identity. And while I think it's great and fun to have roots in all these different places, I struggle with something in Chinese, which is there's an idiom called 落叶回根, which means that fallen leaves of a tree return to their roots, which is a metaphor for no matter where we go out in the world, we're always going to come back home. And when I read that, I was like, well, where is that going to be for me? Because I don't know. And so that's the rootlessness part. And then the restlessness part is that I think I'll always want to be on the go, or I don't feel like I'll be in a place permanently. And I've always thought of life, I was like, okay, I'm going to do my internship here, and then my master's here, and then I'll be back in Vancouver, but then I'll go over here for a job. So I'm always like thinking of like, what's next? And it's really hard for me to be in one place and be still. And I always find a lot of joy in like being in airports, even though like there's crowds and Ryanair sucks and all these things. But I'm like, I'm excited because I'm going somewhere. So always kind of being like forward looking, but never being fully happy with where I am in the present moment. And that makes me think of, well, why am I always chasing something? Why am I always trying to run away from something? And then it's like, oh God, am I running away from myself? So it just opens up all these like questions into, yeah, where do I belong? Where is home? Why can't I be happy with the present and where I am now? So that's something I struggle with as a third culture kid.
Yeah, I definitely resonate incredibly strongly with that. I don't know. I don't think I'm a third culture kid. I mean, I have one culture and then I'm raised in Canada. But I suppose when you come around 12 or 7 and you come to a new country, it's not really your home country. And yet you came at such a young age where you're still developing that your other country is also not your home country anymore. And so when you say go back to your roots, I would never want to go back and live in Russia ever in my life. I don't even really want to visit, especially with what's happening at the moment. But I still don't have that place, as you said. And I think sometimes it's easier to be passing through different places because you know you can always leave. It's almost like a relationship that you don't want to commit to. You saw something negative about the person and you say, okay, on to the next. You know, when you get married, you're in it, both feet in the relationship, which I think is a big struggle for all of us these days, because obviously we don't have jobs that need us in a specific location for most of us, right? Or because we work remotely. And so in that case, you can really be anywhere. And when you can really be anywhere, you don't really have a home country that you love. You are always filled with a sense of restlessness. That's exactly how I feel. And when I'm in Canada, I'm okay for the first month. And then I start getting restless again. And then I go to the new place and I'm like, but is this home? I don't really have a connection to this place. So, you know, I always say like the closest I think I felt to home was I lived in Portugal and I felt really good there. And I think it was because there were so many people in that same boat as me, working as digital nomads and entrepreneurs. And so it's the community that I felt I was like in the right community. And I always say, you know, be in the room with the people that are like you. It's the environment that really shapes you and makes you better. And so for me, that was that place, because when you work from home, you don't have like-minded people around you. And you also cannot relate to people who have 9 to 5. So that's been really hard. But yeah, and I don't know if you felt that, but maybe you will never settle down in one place and maybe you will always be between places, kind of like, you know, either living somewhere a couple of years and then moving on, or, you know, spending 6 months. And maybe that's just the reality for certain people like us. I make myself feel so privileged. Oh, some of us just, you know what I mean?
Winter here, summer there.
Winter in Bali, summer in Europe, on a yacht in the southern France. People are like, listen, lady, I don't have enough money for a ticket out of my home country. And here you are, you know.
First world problems.
Yeah.
Get real.
Yeah. But it's a problem. I don't know. I feel like it's a problem for a lot of people. It's obviously not as much of a problem as living in a country that's being attacked by bombs. Still, it's hard when you don't have a sense of belonging. It's hard. It's easier with a partner.
Yeah, I mean, we also went the other extreme, and we tried digital nomading for 4 months. And on that trip in Southeast Asia, we met people that were nomads for 18 years. Like they just had all their stuff back in Europe in a locker and they've just been traveling and they go from like Chiang Mai to Koh Samui and to Hoi An. And we tried that out for 4 months and like, we're exhausted. Like this is not for us. So we also know that we're not the kind of like full nomad type as well. And we do need some kind of base, at least to ground.
I agree, because there are certain things that you cannot do when you're always moving around. You cannot make friends that fast, or at least quality friends. It's hard to work when you have constant ADD about seeing the place, and you have to work and you're only there for a few months. So how do you manage that? It's really hard. And then I think at a certain point, our mind works in a way where we just don't appreciate it anymore. And you're like, well, I'm living on an island. Okay, next. And so, and you also don't have your own home. You have no place where you feel like you can just relax. So it's also not for me. I would never consider myself a digital nomad. I think we can call ourselves people that are in search for home.
Oh, that's actually very beautiful.
Thank you.
In search for home.
Wow. What is the positive? The gift of being a third culture kid?
The gift is the adaptability and I think the open-mindedness that I talked about in the beginning of the episode, kind of being able to just be curious and like listen empathetically, connect with people in all cultures, like whether I speak the language or not. And that's also something that's helped me in my business as well. So in public speaking coaching, I have clients from all over the world. So in Japan, in New York, in Germany, in Sweden, in Netherlands, in like Dubai, Riyadh, etc. And being able to connect with people and help them on their journey has been an incredible gift that came from me growing up as a third culture kid.
Very nice. Maria, thank you so much for taking part on the podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation. You have such a soothing voice. It's like a perfect public speaking voice. You just sound like every word you say, you want to listen to it. It's very good. You've done a lot of training, I suppose, but it's paid off.
A little bit. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Guys, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to follow, rate, and share it with a friend who might need a little inspiration. And if you have a question for Maria, drop it down below. She might have a chance in between her hectic life to check out the messages and maybe even message you back. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And until next time, stay curious and stay human. Bye. Hope you all enjoyed the podcast. If you made it all the way through, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're watching or listening. Your support helps me bring in bigger guests and surprise you with even better episodes. Until next time.